You're listening to Deeply Curious, a podcast about our ever-evolving philosophy of life and faith and the curious pursuit of knowledge and wisdom.
This is Season 2, Episode 1, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the art of becoming. My name is Cody Jensen, and joining me across the table is the reason I've been given the name Cody Pendant is my wife, Sarah.
Hello.
Deeply Curious and all the art that we create is made possible by you and the members of the Jensen AV Club. This week's show is produced by Christian B. Schmidt, Joel Kai Linz, Amber Day, Greg and Christy Jensen, and Jeff Stevens. If you'd like to be a feature producer of Deeply Curious, check out our Patreon by going to jensenav.club. Link is also in the show notes, and that is jensenav.club. So I just mentioned that this is episode 1 of season 2. We decided to take a little break and come back with a new season of the show. Mm-hmm. We took a break for like 1,000 different reasons. Mm-hmm. A few reasons that we will tell you is one, I personally just wanted a complete fast from technology. So all of December, I was not on the internet. So that was just for personal reasons, wanting to regain some of my humanity. And then secondly, we have been, through November and December, we have been busy with friends and family. We went to our hometown in Oklahoma to spend the holidays in December with our family. And also just we were feeling a lot of probably what could be classified as burnout.
Yeah.
And just needed to regain space, regain margin, regain our humanity, and figure out what this thing is that we call life. Mm-hmm. A lot has happened in the last 2 months. Mm-hmm. Significant life change in myself. And I will get into that in future episodes. One of the reasons that we haven't done any episodes in this last month has been because of so much change has happened in me that it was all consuming and I was not ready to talk about it yet. And if I was to do a podcast, I would end up talking about it. And I wanted to make sure that I processed a lot of the things that I have been going through before I shared it. Right. I'm to a point now where I can at least set it somewhat aside and have a conversation. And so that's why we're here. That's why we're now.
That's what we're doing.
But then a more lighter, funner reason is we did take December off and we went home and we saw family. But then we were coming home from Oklahoma. We drove. So we were driving back to Portland, Oregon, and we got stuck.
Yeah.
Stranded, if you will. After the Christmas holiday in Oklahoma, we were invited to meet with some of our friends in a small town in Colorado to spend New Year's. So we drove there and spent New Year's there. We had a great time. We left New Year's Day. And on our way back to Portland, there is a highway called Interstate 80 that runs through the southern part of Wyoming. And apparently, because it's Wyoming, the weather gets pretty crappy.
Yeah.
And whenever we made it to I-80, and basically we were taking the on-ramp to it, and the gates closed, cops were closing the highway, and there were, I don't know, hundreds of semi-trucks parked on the side of the road.
So many semis.
They were completely closing the I-80, and that was the only route home.
It's a pretty major highway.
And so we had to make the decision right then of like, okay, do we just stop right here and wait till this is open? And we called the number to figure things out. They said it would be like basically there's no actual time of when it's going to reopen. Right. Estimated time was like in 12 hours. We had a 16-hour drive left to get back to Portland. And we're like, okay, so we can sit here for 12 before we have to drive another 16. That sounds awful. So we decided to go south, back to Colorado, and take another route that Google Maps was telling us to go. So we did that, but quickly into driving, only maybe an hour or two, it started, well, almost immediately upon driving, it started to snow.
Yeah.
But then a couple hours into driving, it started to really snow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And then we were about 45 minutes probably outside of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and it was bad. It was really dumping bad. Snow. There were cars like just on the side of the road, flashers on, just stopped in the middle of the highway. This is like a highway that I believe the speed limit was like around 70, and everyone, including us, was going 30 miles an hour at most.
Yeah.
And so we made it. I was like, okay, I see the sign says that Steamboat Springs is, a few miles, how many ever miles, 30 miles, something like that. And I was like, let's just like push through and drive as slow as it takes, but like don't stop until we make it there. Because as a kid, I had been to Steamboat Springs, so I knew it was at least a place that we could stop and have more than just the side of the road to live. So we ended up making it to Steamboat Springs. We found a place to park and sleep for the night. But that night, a huge snowstorm passed through, 18 inches of snow dumped on the town, and the newspaper the next morning said that it was supposed to continue for the next 3 days.
Which I-80 was closed that whole time too.
Right.
And Salt Lake City got 2 feet of snow, which was, we were driving through Salt Lake City.
There was no route that avoided, there was no way that avoided Salt Lake. Or didn't go way north, which is just as bad. So Salt Lake was our next destination. They got 2 feet of snow that next day. And then so we were debating what we should do. And in our little car, we had summer tires on and trying to drive around town that day.
Was not good.
We were sliding and basically realized that if the roads are anything even remotely close to this on the way home, there's no way we should be driving highway speeds.
Yeah.
And it's barely able to drive regular speeds with the tires we have. So we decided if we're going to make it home, we have to get new tires. So we went and we got quotes for tires, and we're like, man, that sucks. I do not want to spend this money. But at the same time, my life is worth more than saving this money. So we decided to get some all-weather tires put on. Whenever they put the tires on, which was the next day. They didn't have an opening for that day, so we had to stay another night. Because it was a small town, they said, nobody in town stocks tires. We have to order them, and they won't be here till tomorrow at 11. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we chose to not sit on the side of the highway for 12 hours, but now we have to stay here for a whole day.
Right.
So stayed there for a whole day, came back the next day around 11. They had the tires in. They put them on, but then about an hour and a half later, they called and said, hey, your like ball bearings or the bearings of something like, I don't know anything about cars, but essentially they showed me a video. It was wiggling when it shouldn't. Right. The wheel, it goes round and round, but it's not supposed to go side to side. Exactly. And it was going side to side a good inch. A good amount. And they were like, that shouldn't budge, let alone move that far. And then I wouldn't drive this across town. Yeah. That's what he said. They're very concerned about it. I took a video of it and sent that to some people who know things, and they were like, yeah, do not drive that. So then we ended up having to spend more money, which is obviously just an unfortunate part of life. And owning cars. So we're like, well, that sucks. Spend even more money, but there was no other option, so we decided to do it. It was Friday. This is a small town, and they close at 5. They did not reopen until Monday, and the job that needed to be done took a half day. And so they're like, we will try as hard as we can to get it done tonight, but we close tonight at 5, and if we don't get done, you're just gonna have to wait till Monday. Long story short, not really short, but I'll wrap it up there and just say we were stuck in Steamboat Springs for 5 days. Yeah. We got to drive out on the 6th day. Yes. On the 6th day of being stuck in Steamboat Springs, luckily, we were very blessed in the fact that the reason I had been to Steamboat Springs whenever I was a kid was because my dad's cousin used to be a pastor at a church in Steamboat Springs, so we had a connection there. And he was able to contact some people he knew, and they were able to let us stay at the church so that we didn't have to sleep in our car in freezing temperatures. 9-degree weather. Because there was no way I was going to get a hotel, because it was a holiday weekend in a really well-known ski town with a really awesome ski resort. We found out that 95 Olympians live in this town, which means that even the Holiday Inn was $300 a night.
Yeah.
La Quinta,
I'll freeze for that.
$300 a night.
Yeah.
So there's no way we were getting a space, but we through our connection we were able to get a place to stay in on some couches in a church, and we stayed there
Which
for
was nice.
all the time. So that was awesome because we were able to take showers and sleep in a heated environment.
Yeah.
But then after that, we drove back to Portland. We were so ready to get home that we drove the 16 hours straight through in one day. But that whole time being stranded and the drive wiped us out. So then when we got here on we
were out for like 5 days.
Yeah, the next day was, just completely gone. And then we basically have been recouping ever since. And now we're here.
So we took an extra extended break.
Yes. So now we are back in Portland, living life, and the podcast is back.
We're here.
So one thing with the podcast, as I said, this is going to be a second season. So one thing we're going to start doing is seasons. We're going to take seasonal breaks. We haven't really nailed down how long the season's going to be, but there is going to be times when we will take like a month and not have any shows and then come back, for the next season, just to give us mental space to explore mentally and find and make sure that this show, becomes what we want it to become, in the same way that we as people want to become who we want to become, which is the conversation we're going to have.
Yes.
But one other update before we get into that conversation is we have decided to, at least for now, not do the video side of the podcast because a couple reasons. One, it is a barrier, is an obstacle for us to do this show regularly. It's just like, it's an added burden that I need it for my own mental space to be able to just do the show.
Right.
And then secondly, and more importantly, having the cameras set up, not only do I have to think about setting them up and think about the fact that they're, recording, and I have to, constantly be aware of that, it doesn't allow Sarah and I the ability to forget that we were recording a podcast and have a completely full open conversation.
Right.
That I feel like it's very easy to forget that there's microphones here, but it's almost impossible to forget that there's cameras. And so I personally like the conversations that we have when there's not cameras set up better than the conversations we have when they're set up. And so for that reason, I've decided for at least the next season, we will not do the video side of the podcast. I will still put the audio recordings on YouTube for those of you who like to listen on YouTube, but basically indefinitely we will not be doing video, and that may change. Yeah. So those are the updates. But now let's jump into the point of the show. So Deeply Curious. This is a show about our ever-evolving philosophies, ever-changing. It's about always growing, always learning. And part of that is always to be becoming the person that you want to become.
Right. Because you're always becoming someone.
Right.
No matter what. And so I think it's important with how much information we always take in, especially now. Things are influencing you, whether you realize it or not. And so I think just being aware of those influences and understanding that they are making you into somebody is important. And is that somebody that you want to be?
Right.
And if it's not, then, you got to do a lot of hard work and change it.
Yeah, I think that one of the most simple things that is one of the most profound but simple things that I learned whenever I was a teenager from having just good leadership around me is something that maybe everybody's heard at this point, but it is the fact that show me your 5 closest friends and I will show you your future.
Yeah.
And
I used to not believe that. I used to be like, I was so sure that wouldn't be me.
Right. But the fact of life is that the things that we take in are the things that we put out and ultimately who we become.
Right.
And so a very simple example of this is, let's say you are generally a positive person, but you get a new job and the people at that job that you spend 8 hours a day with, 5 days a week, are negative people, and they're constantly just venting or bitching or, just complaining. Like, regardless if the complaining is warranted or not. Sometimes you have a terrible boss and the venting is warranted. And sometimes it is just that there are negative people who can't find anything to talk about other than
what's negative
because of their own psychological issues. But it doesn't really matter if it is warranted or not. If you are surrounded by negative people day in, day out, the chances of you joining in and also becoming negative are real high.
Right. I mean, I think we all can understand how we feel before we get on Twitter and how we feel after we get off Twitter. You know what I mean? Like that's it makes sense.
Yeah. So, I think that one is taking account of like, who you're spending all your time with.
Right.
Are you spending your time with people who you want to become like? Are you spending your time with people who you don't want to become like? Right. Are you not even aware of, like you're just hanging out with people? And, if you were actually looked at it from an objective point of view, you say, these people are not who I want to become like, and or are not striving to become the person that I want to become.
Right.
Because, it doesn't have to be that, you want to be, whatever it is. Let's just say you want to be a NBA basketball player. Just throw something out there that none of us will ever be. You want to play in the NBA.
Right.
Obviously, there's the whole side of like, practice and all that stuff. But let's just say that the people around you also want to become an NBA basketball player. Your likelihood of taking the steps necessary to become that person are significantly higher than if you were surrounded with people who, one, don't want to become NBA basketball players, don't even like basketball, and spend their times like watching Netflix.
Right.
You are going to have a significantly harder time following your goals and your dreams and becoming that person that you want to become, because the people around you are not encouraging you to become the person you want to become and are actively actually discouraging you because they want you to be with them sitting on the couch watching Netflix.
Right. But it's not even, obviously that's a really good example of like being around people, but it's not even people that, turn you into somebody that you don't want to be. You know what I mean? Like, advertising and American, because we're in America, American ideals of, or like, you know what I mean? Things that they promote, turn you into a person, right? Like, so if we're constantly being shown ads for like consuming products, like we're going to be consumers,
right?
You know what I mean? Or maybe like individualism is like a very, very held high belief of Americans. And so like without you even realizing it, you have this like firm belief in individualism and you don't even really know why. You know what I mean? So like it's all of those even more subtle ideas that are very hard to recognize,
right?
That are turning you into a person. And I think that's more like our case is like we've been recognizing all of these much more subtle things, more so than like, oh, I'm spending time with this person who doesn't, necessarily exemplify positivity or whatever. But like it's the more subtle ideas that you've been ingrained in your whole life that we are realizing have actually affected who we've become as people.
Right.
And I think just kind of weighing that against like who we actually want to be is really more like what we've been doing the last couple of months, which is really, really hard to
Right.
because you don't even realize how much it affected every single life decision you make,
Right.
you know, because it does.
Right. Because I think the hard part about that is not realizing that you're becoming somebody you don't want to be, but realizing you became someone you didn't want to become.
Right. Like there are things that I've, even just like on small levels that I've always done that are kind of opposite of my values, but like I didn't even realize that they were, you know, like for example, I have a Amazon Prime membership because it's convenient, but my values are so opposite of Amazon as a company. You know what I mean? And so like, I'm looking at this going, why am I supporting this thing that I don't even believe in? Like, this is so crazy. But it's just because American life is all about convenience.
Right.
And I didn't even really put that together until this year.
Yeah. It's like we became people who were choosing convenience over what is right.
Right. Over my own personal morals.
Right.
And it's like even little stuff like that I've been noticing that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming a person that I don't even support, you know, even in the tiniest of ways, which is, I mean, it's hard to admit, you know, but that is part of becoming. That's part of, you know, realizing who you are becoming, and I guess kind of looking in the future and seeing who that could be 10 years from now. Like maybe it's not a big deal right now, you know, but like what does that lead to down the road?
Right.
And do I want that?
Right. Yeah, that's something that I have thought about. I mean, I'm very thankful that I had strong mentors whenever I was growing up, and this is something that I have thought about for a long time. And it's easy, even though I knew it, to forget it and ignore it, you know, whatever in my own life. But something that is so important to learn and to like really take in and think about is that one seemingly insignificant decision, while it means nothing today, could mean a massive deal in 10 years. If you think about, a way to think about this is if you were to draw two parallel lines on a piece of paper that are both going the exact same, you know, direction in the, you know, same velocity, everything, and you were to take one of those lines and shift it a half of a degree to one side, in, you know, within a few inches, you know, they're not really that far apart, you know, a couple more inches and they're still not that far apart. But if you keep drawing both of those lines, the line that shifted a half a degree ends up pointing a completely different direction. Like it goes somewhere else, and it becomes a different, you know, line. It becomes a different person than what it was making a half a degree decision, you know, in the very beginning.
Yeah. I actually saw this thing online this week. Somebody posted, I don't remember, it was on Tumblr or something. And they said, you know, it's kind of crazy when you think about in all these movies, when people go back in time, they're so worried about changing one tiny detail because that will change everything in their present, you know? But none of us think that anything we do right now is going to change anything in our future. And I was like, oh, like just that mental image of like, it's true. When we go back in time, we're so scared of what we're going to mess up. But like, we don't consider that what we do right now is going to have an effect in our future.
That's really good.
And I think that's exactly like what you're talking about with the shift, you know?
It's like whenever these characters, they go back in time and they're like, you know, they fret over insignificant things.
Right.
Because they know like, well, if I didn't cross that street that day, then I wouldn't have seen that.
If I didn't eat in this restaurant, then I wouldn't have met that person.
Right.
Or whatever. And so you have to retrace your steps if you don't want a different outcome, if you want what you already have. But like now in our present, we're like, I mean, why does it matter if I do this thing today or tomorrow or in 2 months?
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
But like it matters a whole lot.
You know, actually that basically that kind of same thing reminds me that while we were stranded in Steamboat Springs, we watched Yes Man on Netflix.
Yeah.
And that is a prime example. If you watch that movie, a guy goes from basically being a hermit in his house, always saying no to everything, to he goes to this like wacky self-help like conference, and he teaches them to say yes to absolutely everything.
Right.
So he leaves the conference, he goes and he says, a homeless man asks him for a ride to the park. He says yes because, you know, he just stepped out of the thing. He asked him for all of his money. He says yes because he has to. And then he runs out of gas and he doesn't have any way to pay for it. And then he runs into a woman who helps him with a ride to go get the gas. And basically, throughout the course of the movie, falls in love with this woman, and et cetera, et cetera. Hilarity ensues. But the point is, the saying yes to those things, the insignificant changes, led to a 100% different life than what he started with. With just saying yes to giving a ride to a homeless man. So, the point of that is a very small, insignificant change, a seemingly small, insignificant change, can lead to you becoming a completely different person than you are today. You know, in either a near distant future or a distant future.
And either in a positive or negative way.
Right.
And we do not give that enough weight. We don't think about it. And I think that over the last couple of months, you and I have been really thinking about that. About like, what am I chasing? Why am I chasing it? And who is it making me into? Is it making me into somebody that I am proud of or not? You know?
Yeah. I think one last mental picture, metaphor for what it means to become a person that you want to become with intention is to picture your life as a huge growing tree. And a tree starts with one path at the trunk, at the bottom. And as you go about your life, there will be decisions in your life. And those decisions are the, you know, half a dozen to dozen huge branches that come off of the trunk. So you made that decision. Now that's the branch that you are becoming. And then that branch branches off into dozens, if not hundreds, of other decisions of other twigs or whatever. And each one of those is a different decision into becoming who the person that you are becoming. And that basically keeps happening until there are, if you look at a tree, at the top of the canopy, there are thousands of different directions that tree went, all stemming from one trunk at the bottom. And that is life. That is us. There are thousands of people that I can become. And if I am not intentional, I don't get to decide which of those people I become. I just become one of them, and I don't even know if I'll like the person at the end. With intention, you can choose and you can, you know, stay the course of like, I want to become this person, and you make the decisions necessary to become that person, so that whenever you reach the end of your branch and you sprout with your, you know, fruits, it's who you want to be.
Yes, and I think it's probably fair to maybe point out or say that we're not talking about like who you want to be in a career or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people automatically, because again, we live in that kind of society where all of our value is in our job and et cetera, how much money you make or whatever. But that's like, couldn't be further from what we're talking about, which is like you as a human being. And that is far, far more important than anything you ever achieve. So I just wanted to point that out, that we're not talking about jobs here. We're talking about like souls and hearts and like humans.
Yes. You in your core, your essence, the person that you are, the person who shows up to work. Are you a person, you know, who is of love and shows up with, you know, joy and happiness, and you live a content life? Or, you know, are you a different person who shows up irritable and is always in a hurry and is always snapping at people, or, you know, whatever it is, that regardless if if I am that person, like if I become somebody who I am generally just not being nice, and I'm just feeling superior, or I'm hurting other people or whatever, and I judge myself by my own intentions, and I'm like, well, I mean, I'm a good person though. It's like,
Right.
I wasn't, really nice to that, barista, or I, did cut those people off in traffic, or I was, rude with Sarah, but I mean, that's not really who I am. I mean, that's not who I am. I mean, my intentions are better than that. That's how I'm showing up. That's how I'm acting. That's the results of the system of my life. But, at the same time, it's not really who I am.
Right.
But that's not true.
Right.
That's the lie we like to tell ourselves, because
who you are is
how you show up.
Yes.
Who you are is how you show up. And so the person that is showing up is the person I'm becoming. And if I don't like how I am showing up as a cynical, bitter person, or a negative person, or somebody who is not generally nice, or whatever it is, or just somebody who is always sad, like just all of these things, those are all a huge part of living a life of being a human and enjoying the human existence and being a part of the oneness of others. If we are not becoming those people, then who are we becoming?
Right.
And if we don't recognize that, and if we don't change course, if we don't maintain healthy relationships around us to help us become those people, then we become people who are in constant striving for more and never truly step into a life of love and contentment.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You could achieve the most. I mean, you could be an incredible achiever, in your career. You could have money and fame and whatever, whatever you're searching for. You can achieve all of that and still be a very kind human if you have your priorities right. Often you can become a person you don't even recognize, and then what's the point? So, and the same is true of the opposite. You could achieve literally nothing and be the most content you've ever felt. Jobs have nothing to do with it.
Right.
I guess is what I'm saying.
It's like the platitude of you gain the world but lose your soul.
Right.
And what is it worth it?
Right. But it's not to say that you shouldn't try to achieve, you know what I mean? I guess what I'm saying is that it's not one or the other. You don't have to give up everything that you've always wanted in order to be a good person. That's not the trade-off. I do think that oftentimes searching for being a good person won't lead to, the achiever lifestyle, but that's beside the point. It's not about having one or the other. You don't have to, go into poverty in order to be a good person. A lot of people, there's a very dualistic thinking in that, and that's not the case, I guess is what I'm saying. But anyway.
Yeah. And I think that one thing that I personally believe is that if your North Star, if the thing that you are directing your life toward, you're like, I want to become the CEO, of whatever, if your direction you're pointing your life is based on achievement, then you will end up becoming somebody you didn't intend to become.
Yes.
Because you're going to have to compromise your essence in order to become that thing.
I agree.
But if you try, if instead you point your life towards becoming the human that you want to become, while exercising your talents, gifts, and abilities, you may not achieve the thing that you ultimately thought you were going to achieve to the level, but if you become a person of love and contentment, then you will actually gain way more than what that corner office ever promised.
I saw somebody, this is a little bit off topic, but not completely, so whatever, I'll say it. Somebody said something, I think it was a tweet or whatever. They said, the biggest lie capitalism ever sold us is that there are dream jobs. And I thought, that's actually, when you really think about it, that's kind of true. You don't have to have a certain job to be happy. And oftentimes you get the job that you think will make you happy, and you're more disappointed than you were before.
Right.
And like, so it's just like, I guess what I'm saying is that it's not worth orienting your life around one specific job.
Right.
Now, I do think that like you should pursue art and like your craft of whatever that is. Like, absolutely, you should pursue that. But I don't think it's worth orienting your entire life around, because it's not going to fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
What will fix everything is becoming a person that you can look at in the mirror.
Right.
You know? And so I think that's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for, you know, how to orient your life towards what matters?
I think that obviously it's going to be different for every person, but I think that the way to, you just have to be the most brutally honest with yourself. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to do that. But if you can truly look at yourself in the mirror and say, like, I am incredibly selfish. This is stupid. I think that that's where you have to start. Like, there's a quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she says something about no transformation or self-transformation or something. No transformation happens until a person is tired of their own bullshit. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, you just have to admit your own bullshit mm-hmm. before you can do anything.
Yeah.
I think that's like the place to start. And unfortunately, I don't think enough people are willing to be that honest with themselves. Mm-hmm. But if you can be,
yeah,
it'll be better in the long run.
I think that for me, that you will never be, I don't believe you will get to that point until you cut out the noise.
Oh, I 100% agree. I think there are certain things in life that you can pretty much guarantee is the path forward, I guess you would say. Poets, philosophers, theologians, like whatever your worldview is, there's somebody who has figured it out. Like, it's not, it's all about finding quiet and solitude and hearing yourself think and like getting away from the noise of urbanization and like sitting somewhere quiet, usually in nature, but not always, and just like doing nothing. And that is when everything becomes so clear and you're like, oh, this is what I should be doing. Okay. And then like you just can go and do it, mm-hmm. But it really does take turning off Netflix and music and, all other kinds of noise that we have to distract us before you can get there.
Right. So in the scope of like becoming the person that you want to become, I think in order to recognize who you are is the first step. Yes. Is like you have to recognize who you are, where you're at, in order to say, I'm not becoming the person that I want to become, or that I am, regardless. I think if you know you're becoming that, then you don't even need to be listening to me. But
right, like, this isn't for people who have figured it out. Yeah.
Then it's more so like we all need to be self-aware. Like that is obviously we are huge proponents of yes. self-awareness, because self-awareness ultimately is, everything. And in that self-awareness, you have to figure out who are you now, mm-hmm. And see yourself from an outside perspective, and so that you can change. That cannot happen unless you are able to make space and margin to see that.
Right.
And in regards to becoming a person that you didn't intend to become, if, let's say I chose, like if I'm watching the 24-hour news cycle day in, day out, I'm going to become a bitter, cynical, negative person who has a pessimistic view of humanity. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have a pessimistic view of the future of this country, of people in general, because that is what I'm feeding myself. I'm feeding myself this constant, beratement of negative stories, of pundits yelling at each other, things that are nonsense. And, mm-hmm. Regardless if it is true or not true, filling yourself with that much information and that much negativity, and ultimately filling yourself with in a silo of one-sided opinion, you end up becoming that. And if you fill yourself with people yelling on TV, then you will become a person who yells at others who disagree with you.
Right.
Same is if you are passively just living your life and letting just content fill you up, you're just going to be a passive person. It's just you. Are you still watching? Yes. Click. Mm-hmm. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. That you will become a completely lethargic, passive person who just is a watcher, a consumer, and you will not have the drive and the motivation and the ability to become someone who is a doer, a creator, mm-hmm. because you are filling yourself so full, time-wise and mind-wise, with just consuming. Mm-hmm. Same is true with social media. That is our phones we are slaves to our phones. This technological brick in our pocket, it has consumed all of us, mm-hmm. to the point that we look at our screen hundreds of times a day. We spend, as Americans, on average, spend like 4 to 6 hours per day, mm-hmm. on our phone. And if you were to change, let's say, you change your mental state of this and say like, okay, I spend 4 to 6 hours on my phone. That's average. What would happen if you spent 4 to 6 hours a day playing piano? Mm-hmm. How amazing of a piano player would you be in a year if you spent 4 to 6 hours
right.
playing piano?
Right.
But instead, we choose 4 to 6 hours at looking at our phone, passively scrolling through information that ultimately either makes us chuckle a little bit, mm-hmm. At little funny things, or, and more likely, makes us angry, or makes us feel negative against the world or negative against another human, even if it was just scrolling Pinterest and, nothing negative ever came up. It's just looking at pretty things to escape. That is the person you become.
Right.
And that 4 to 6 hours on your phone in 1 year, that just means that you became a professional scroller.
Right.
And is that the person that I want to become? No.
Right.
I don't want to reach 2021 and realize that I have spent 4 to 6 hours a day passively living my life and just falling into just consumption instead of becoming.
Right.
And I think that that's the, I don't know, the path, the risk, that's what I feel like. There are more people falling into becoming consumers, mm-hmm. than are people who are becoming.
Right. And I think you just have to admit it to yourself. It's not a new thing either. I read an essay a couple months ago from David Foster Wallace before social media was even a thing. He wrote the essay in 1990 about the TV culture in America. And there's a line that he said in there that I still can't stop thinking about it. He said, Americans willingly went from doers and beers to watchers and appearers, meaning we appear to be, productive or whatever, but we're not. Mm-hmm. And I just I can't stop thinking about that, and that was in 1990. He had far less things to worry about being consumed by than we do today. Mm-hmm. And I know the internet's cool and it brings a lot of opportunities and, whatever. I'm not arguing that, but until you can admit to yourself what you're really using the internet for, which is escapism and consumerism and passive scrolling, mm-hmm. Then you're not going to become a person that like a well-rounded human being, I guess. I don't,
Right. You're not going to become a person.
Yeah, you're not going to become a doer and a beer. You're going to always be a watcher.
Right.
And I don't want that for myself.
I mean, like a picture that I just got was the humans from the movie WALL-E.
Yeah.
That they just became an entire society of people who are just obese consumers sitting in floating chairs with screens in front of their face, just in a constant state of consumption.
Yeah.
And I would not call that being human.
Right.
I would not call that as somebody who became who they intended to become.
Right.
They were fed like basically lies, and then in the same way that a lab rat will like consume heroin until it dies, we're being fed like media heroin, and just that our phones, our TVs, our billboards, everything
right
are just screaming at us to become consumers, screaming at us to consume more, think less, and buy things, watch things. And there is, I don't want to demonize anything.
Right, like it's not all bad by any means.
I mean,
it's just
social media can be an amazing thing.
Everything in moderation.
Right. Social media can be an amazing thing. Movies are incredible. Music is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
We have so many just absolutely amazing, life-giving things now that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Right.
But we can so easily fall into the trap that we have to see, consume all of it.
Right.
And that is just not true. And we are consuming at alarming rates, and we're consuming at significantly higher rates than our humanity can handle. And I think, this is my personal opinion, that is evident by our completely divisive culture, in that we are no longer humans of empathy. We are no longer humans that can see things outside of a dualistic perspective of right and wrong. We just see everything as I am right, you are wrong. We have to fight about it.
Let me find the things that back up my opinion.
Right. And that is all because we are not actually becoming people. We are being told what to say, what to do, and we are falling into the trap of not being human, but being a mouthpiece for an agenda.
Yes. And I think like it's a hard pill to swallow. It really is, to sit back and think like, are my opinions my actual own opinions, or are they opinions that I've been told to have, And like, if you want to kid yourself, you can. You know what I mean? Like it's possible. Like, but there are so many things recently that I've realized that I've always believed or thought I believed that I didn't even have a say in. Like I didn't even like sit back and think like, oh yeah, this makes total sense. I do believe this. You know what I mean? It's just like the American culture. It's like the culture I was raised in made a lot of my opinions for me, and I didn't even realize it. And so I think until you can sit back and truly admit that you don't really know who you are or why you are who you are, you're not going to be any different. But I think it's imperative that we all figure out how to be different.
Right.
Like we're not in a good spot, obviously, like the country as a whole. Like we're not great.
Yeah.
So I think like it's just really important to be self-aware, to be so brutally honest with yourself, and to ask why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I chasing what I'm chasing? Do I actually want this crap? Because the answer is no. I mean, so I don't know. I think like we've been talking about or reading a lot about all of that stuff in the last couple of months.
Yeah. And
so I think getting quiet, cutting out the noise, a solitude, which we're all terrified of, is the answer. I think, slowing down, meaning like we're all in a rush to get nowhere. What do we do? You know what I mean? Like, do you really need to be there right now? Or do you have like 2 minutes?
Right. Or do you need to be there right now? But the reason you're not is because your schedule or your capacity was so full that you were not able to, have margin to the point where you're able to get to where you're going on time, which makes you're in a hurry, which means you're in a bad mood.
Right. Do you really have to be like an asshole to that person because you didn't give yourself 2 extra minutes to get, you know what I mean? Like, it just is it's so dumb. So slow down, find solitude, cut out the noise. And I think simplicity, like the fewer things you have to worry about, the less worried you will be, So like, instead of trying to add more, why don't you just like cut out some stuff? Do you really need a subscription to Netflix and HBO and Hulu and Disney Plus? And, do you really? No. Just pick one. And then you don't have to try and afford $100 plus every month of freaking TV subscriptions. It's just, it's stupid.
2 things. One, a quote that Sarah's going to be mad that I said and she didn't, but I will give her credit that I do not know this quote only because of her.
Okay. Thank you.
Mary Oliver says that attention is the beginning of devotion.
Yes.
And that if we give our attention to Netflix, if we give our attention to our phone, if we give our attention, whatever we're giving our attention to, that is the beginning of devotion.
But yeah.
And
that's what we devote our time and our life to.
Do you want to be defined as a person who devoted themselves to watching, devoted themselves to consuming, devoted themselves to scrolling? If whatever you give your attention to is what you end up being devoted to. And I think that if we look at it that way, we will realize, like, I don't want to be defined by what I'm giving my attention to right now.
Right.
My attention is being squandered away. And if my life is defined by what I gave my attention to, my life has no definition because it is not of my own. It is of companies.
Yeah, exactly.
And then secondly, something that I think about, and I think it's so good to think about, is if you look around at all of the people around you in your personal life, all the people around you in your social sphere, or just through media, that you're able to see all of the American lives that you can personally see, and think about, are these people being, doing, and becoming the person that I want to be? And I feel as though the answer for me is no.
Right.
Which means I cannot live my life in the same manner of which all of these other people are living and expect my life to be different. Right. The American culture, America is becoming more and more depressed every year. Suicide rates are going up. The loneliness rates are skyrocketing.
Crime is going up.
Crime is going up. Like, there's all of these things, like that overall mental health is not looking positive. Right. So if I don't want to be a person who is lonely, sad, depressed, anxious, etc., 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 like almost everybody that I look around and see are, then I can't just go about living my day like all of those people, like a good American, and expect for me to be different.
Yeah, I think also, this is a personal opinion, but I think that we also have a responsibility as human beings to make the world better and brighter and to, leave it in a better state than we found it, right? I think that you have an inherent responsibility as a human being to be as good as you can. And so that obviously means doing something different than what we're doing right now, because we're not being good humans, And if that makes me if that makes me misunderstood by a lot of people, then I guess so be it. Right. I think you have a responsibility to be a good human, regardless of your own personal wants, or what you think are your own personal wants, but are really, somebody else telling you what you want. But you know, like we have a responsibility in that. And so, I mean, maybe that's just what I believe, but I think it's true.
Yeah. I think that to that point and to what I said a minute ago, like a business principle that I recently learned that applies so well to business, but even more so, I feel like, to our personal life, is that the system you have in place is perfectly designed for the results that you are getting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not like the results that you are getting, then that means you need to change the system.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you don't grasp that from the beginning, you know, it's basically what I was saying, that if I look around and see that if I live the typical American consumeristic life, most of those people are becoming people of, you know, loneliness, depression, anxiety, anger, you know, just irritable, like all of these things. If I want to be different, then I have to change the system of which I live in, which means if that system is the typical American way, that means I have to live in a countercultural way, live in a way that is misunderstood, develop a system for my life that is countercultural to the culture I live in order to get a different result. I cannot just go to work, you know, buy into the fact that I need to watch every Netflix series that's coming out, buying into the fact that I need to be up on the news, buy into the fact that I need to have the nice car, buy into the fact that I need to be chasing the career ladder, buy into the fact of et cetera, of the American dream, the pursuit of happiness, which is an ironic thing for the fact that it has not led anybody to true happiness. I have to live my life and set up my personal life system in order to gain different results. And I think that has helped me, like personally. Looking at it that way has opened my eyes to so many things, because I just cannot continue to live in the exact same system and expect my results to change.
Right. So I think that's probably a good segue to talk about what is that, like, what does that mean in the future? Like, what are we doing differently that, you know what I mean? Because there are things that are obviously going to be changing for feeling all these feelings. Yeah.
So, you know, what does it mean for our work? Blah, blah, blah. If you follow us in general and you watch our videos and the podcast, you will have noticed that obviously we have been missing for a minute. So there's that. But then there's also that we have not been putting out the amount of videos that we used to. We also have not been putting out the same type of videos that we used to. So let's talk about the video front of what that means for us. So for me, I have said this before on the podcast as I was processing through it, but for me, one thing is that the world does not need any more content. The world has way too many voices screaming at you to give your attention to them. If every time I put out a video, I am asking you to give me your attention for however long that video is.
Right.
And if that video does not bring value to your life, if it just made you passively sit there and watch something that gave you nothing, that did not lead you into becoming a person who is in control of their life and actually contributed to the problem of life of just, you know, passively letting life happen to you, then I am evil. And I'm not saying that everybody who does that is evil. I'm just saying, like, for me, like, because I know it, because I'm convicted by it, because I have this, like,
strong
moral
opinion,
weight on it. If I know that and I'm convicted by it, and I still choose to make things that ultimately are stealing your attention away from you, then that makes me a part of the problem.
Right. It's compromising your character, which is just like how I was talking about with Amazon. You know, like I'm compromising my morals currently by having a Prime membership. Right. So, like, if you're aware of it, you have a responsibility to do something about it if you're convicted by it. Otherwise, you're compromising who you are and other people too. I mean,
like, I just want to, the point of the whole thing is that we will not be creating videos to the level that we were as far as like frequency.
Right.
Because we will only be making videos that we believe bring value and is worth the time we are asking you to give to it.
Right.
So with the way I define that, this has been the harder part for me, because sometimes, like a travel video, I have a hard time saying like, oh yeah, this has value. But then there are many of you who reach out to me through the comments or through other forms, and you tell me that those videos brought you some sort of peace or brought you some sort of perspective because of the way that, you know, we traveled in that way, or the way we lived out our life or whatever. I can fall prey to the curse of knowledge in that way, that thinking that this is just the way I live my life. I feel like everybody lives my life this way. So if I just film this and put it out on the internet, it brings no value, because what did it actually teach?
Right.
But that's because I fell prey to the curse of knowledge, thinking that just not fathoming the idea that people don't know some of the things that I know. So I do understand that there is some entertainment value, which I feel the world needs no more entertainment. There's plenty of amazing entertainment for you to go consume if that's what you're looking for. So I feel as though my art needs to be more than just entertaining. And so, you know, with the travel things, it can be that it brings a perspective to travel. It brings a slowness to your, like that 10 minutes that I, you know, asked you to watch, and you know, graciously gave that 10 minutes to me to watch it, that it was done in such a way that whenever you leave that 10 minutes, you feel more at ease, more at peace with who than you did when you started.
Right.
And so I know that that is of value. And so that is one thing. But then other, you know, there are many other, basically I could go on and on about a million different ways that something could bring value. But I wanted to specifically bring that one because that's the one I've struggled with the most, of just creating like a travel film with no moral.
Right.
And then I would love to like create videos that actually have a moral, like have a question, or, you know, like this podcast, like it's like the video form of this, and it's like short, it's sweet, it is a, you know, a beautifully crafted, you know, thing that makes you question, you know, this, that, or the other. So all of that to be said, the YouTube side of things will be changing. It'll also be much less. It'll also be very inconsistent, because I am not going to create things just to create things. It's going to have to be something that I feel is inspired.
Right.
And has a purpose.
Right.
So, and I think that that is obviously going to be defined by me. It's my YouTube channel. I have and so it'll be things that I feel bring value to at least somebody.
Right.
And, you know, maybe not every single one will bring value to you, and don't watch it.
Right.
Like, I'm not like, if it's not going to bring value to you, do not give me your attention, because I don't want your attention to be squandered away on something that brought no value.
Right.
Same with this podcast. Ultimately, we make this because we believe that as we go on our journey of becoming the people that we want to become, we can share that journey with others, to bring them alongside us, to bring perspective, bring questions, bring maybe even answers to things that some people have been looking for. And this is basically a one-sided group conversation that I would be having with anybody in my life.
Right.
And I believe it has immense value in that. But if you listen to this and it doesn't ultimately, if it is just passive, or it is not actually bringing life value or knowledge, then don't give me your attention. Like, your attention is the most valuable thing you have. Do not squander it away.
Exactly.
But if this is something that is actually, helping in any way, thank you, like, for listening. Thank you for being a part of it. But ultimately, I don't want to continue doing this. Like, I'm giving my attention and my, time to this because I believe it brings value. But if it's not, then I would rather go do something else.
Right.
That wasn't really in the plans of talking about, but there it is.
Yeah, so I think videos will be less consistent, but it's not that they won't exist at all. It just, as we figure out our life, we'll make videos if we feel like it adds value. We do feel like that we can bring value to the podcast easier and more frequently than videos. So we will try to remain weekly on the podcast. We are doing seasons, which we mentioned earlier. But we are going to try and make it as weekly consistently as possible. But then I think there are other things within that we will be like changing or revamping or whatever. Like we're going to be redoing the Patreon and different stuff like that just to match our capacity and what we can do, and also what we feel like is fair to you guys and all of that stuff too.
All right. So that's where we're going to end this show. Thank you guys for listening and joining us on this journey. And thanks for your immense, your graciousness and patience in our absence.
Yes.
And if you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would give us a review on iTunes or share a favorite episode with a friend. You can also partner with us by joining our Patreon at Jensen AV Club. Our intro music is provided by MusicBed. Learn more about MusicBed's unlimited music subscription plan at music.codyjensen.com. And like we mentioned, we make videos. If you have never seen any of our videos and would like to check them out, you can do that by going to youtube.com/CodyJensen. All right, thank you guys for listening to Deeply Curious, and we will see you next week.
Bye.